Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Thursday, the 3rd of April, 2025. I am Graham Hughes, and you are watching Morning Brew on Politics Social. How you all doing out there in internet land? We've got Veg Pie, we've got One Angry Pagan, we've got Scott, we've got Alchemist in the chat, we've got Leap Shit in the chat, Colin Baker, we've got Veg Pie, hi Veg Pie, we've got Siskin Edge, we've got Sarah Davis in there, and Anne Phillips. How you all doing? If you'd like to join our friends in the chat here, everyone's very friendly. Just hit the subscribe button and you can join in. Just say whatever you want to say, as long as it's not trollish, offensive, or mean. If it is, we will, say it with me, mute you and boot you. Well, you'll be able to watch. You just won't be able to, do anything about it. Like a eunuch at an orgy. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Trump's tariffs this morning and what a fucking idiot, what a freaking idiot he is. Liberation Day, he called it. Announced, he made this announcement and it had an immediate impact on the globe. Stock markets across the east are falling this morning on the news. They'll fall across Europe as stock markets open up today, and then they'll fall in America itself. These tariffs are based on flawed calculations, and they're based on a series of falsehoods that just aren't part of the real world. And this is the predicament that we have got ourselves into as humans right now. We have put the village idiots of the world together and given them the richest and most powerful country in the world to run. The idiot rich boys and girls brigade. Just the absolute moronic fuckwits that ended up. This is why monarchies fell. Because invariably, you'll get an absolute idiot king. You'll get a vicious king. Now and again, you'll get a vicious idiot for a king. And it would destroy everything. It's why countries where people get elected, they're in power for a few years and someone else gets elected, work so much better than a country in which it's the son or even daughter of the last person to hold the job. They are the worst people to take over that job. Okay, not always. Sometimes it works out all right. But, it's like sequels to a movie. It's the law of diminishing returns. You get further down the line and there's always some absolute moron or psycho. You had the British line of succession till Richard III, and then suddenly, psychopath, murdered the princes in the tower, and then great, we got glorious age of Mary and Elizabeth. That died off. He needed to bring someone else to bring King James down, and that was all right for a bit until Charles I, when he said, "Hey, let's put a tax on ships." Yeah, Parliament didn't like that. The people didn't like that. They chopped his head off. But then they put his son in charge, who was also fucking useless, but at least he didn't put taxes on things. And he ended up being this, the fun times king, wasn't he? He was the Boris Johnson of kings. And they replaced him when Steve carked it. We asked the stadtholder of fucking, I don't know, Utrecht or somewhere to come over and be our king. Hey, Dutch guy. He's like walking down the street doing Dutch things. I don't know, he's pushing a wheel of cheese down the street, whatever the Dutch do. He's on the canal. He's on the canal on a windmill, in a windmill-shaped boat with a wheel of cheese. And they say to him, hey, mate, would you like to be our king? And he's like, all right, yeah. And that's how we got William III. Just like, okay, we'll just... Because hereditary monarchies only last for maybe 2 generations if you're lucky, and then they all go to shit. Because genes, genetics, I don't know. It's all the nepo babies in Hollywood at the moment. They're doing me head in. And, some of them are talented. I'm not going to disagree with that, but they got a foot in the door because, Daddy was the biggest box office star of the 1980s. It's not the level playing field. Anyway, let's talk about tariffs. It's infuriating, but there you go. So there's a baseline 10% tariff that Trump has put on all imports into America. That's your baseline. So if he thinks that the trade deficit is 10%, which is not, but let's say he thinks that it is, for everyone else, he would have halved that. So if he thought the trade deficit with Australia was 56%, for instance. So that I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but he literally just halved that number of what he thought what we thought the tariffs were that people were setting for him, all the countries were setting with him. He halved it, except for the UK, which, according to his calculations, which are wrong, he says they have a 10% tariff that we put on them, an unfair tariff. So he's got to put a 10% tariff on us. First of all, we don't put a 10% tariff on them. That's a nonsense. We'll get to that in a moment. But secondly, why did everyone else get like the whatever stupid number he cooked up using ChatGPT, by the way? Oh my God. Whatever number he fucking cooked up, he halved it and went, yeah, they're gonna half. So you had countries like China getting an additional 34%, which is going to take it up to 54% when combined with existing levies. Vietnam got hit by a 46% tariff. India got 26% tariff. Japan 24%. South Korea 25%. And the European Union got a 20% tariff. So the usual knobheads are going to peddle this as like this big Brexit gain that we've got because we're not part of the EU. And therefore, right, we only got 10%. Right, so the amount of stuff that we export to the US, the amount that is worth is something like 0.8% of our GDP, right? So half of that is 0.4%. So we're talking about 0.4% of our GDP might be in fact impacted by this. But we've lost 4% leaving the EU. We trade 3 times as much with the EU than we do with the US. So if we bend over backwards to try and get this 10% levy off our goods going into the United States, then we'd actually be better spending our time and efforts getting closer to the EU, because that would yield better economic benefits. But now we have the worst of both worlds. We've got, at least the EU can trade amongst itself and with other countries around the world. Whereas the UK, it's put up trade barriers with the EU, and it's now got massive trade barriers with the US. Who are you going to sell them to? Aquaman? Anyway, One Angry Pagan, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Woo! Evo is nature's trial and error test. This is an error. Evolution. Yeah, you can't fuck if you're dead. That's what Charles Darwin said about evolution and how it works. Anyway, so yeah, let's talk about the flawed formula, the calculation method that they come. So he's got this thing, right, and he's got all these numbers on, right, and he says this is the tariffs that we're getting charged, okay, right, by all these countries. They're not. They're absolutely not. They're 100% not those numbers, those figures that he came up with. They took the country's trade surplus, right? And then with the US, and then they divided it by the total exports to the US. Okay. So like most things that the US sell around the world, there is a trade deficit in a way. But first of all, they've had a trade deficit in America since the 70s, okay? Since the Bretton Woods Accords were thrown out the window by Nixon. So for as long as I've lived, in fact longer, over 50 years, America has had a trade deficit with the rest of the world. That's not been a problem for America becoming, staying the richest country in the world by a country mile. Because it just meant that Americans could buy stuff from other countries, fair enough. But his thinking here is that if they jack up the prices of everything coming from China, everything coming from Japan, people will buy American stuff. But it won't make the American stuff cheaper, because all the bits and pieces that go into the American made stuff, it is going to get more expensive as well, because they've got to bring in all those parts. They've got to bring in those semiconductors. They've got to bring in that lithium. They've got to bring in that coltan, whatever it is that they need. There's got to be a levy on it. And that levy is paid for by the companies importing it, not by the countries exporting it. We're not going to pay this. We're not going to pay a 10% tariff. Nothing to do with us. It's going to be the companies in America buying our stuff, and they're going to pass it on to the American consumer. And so prices are going to rise. Inflation's going to rise. Everything's going to rise. The frustration with the Republican Party for not understanding the basics of economics. So you've got this, 10% tariff, baseline tariff, and then you've got these higher tariffs for other countries that have been calculated on this miscalculation. And that calculation was suggested, it seems to have been suggested by ChatGPT. I shit you not. These people in charge of America are fucking amateurs. They're fucking amateurs. They're so stupid. It's off the charts. The calculation method that they've used is it's ridiculous. It's farcical. These countries aren't, Indonesia isn't putting a 76% tariff on American goods coming in. There's McDonald's in Indonesia. There's Coca-Cola. There's Levi's jeans in Indonesia. But if they think that they're going to make clothing cheaper in America than it can be made in China or in Vietnam or in Bangladesh, they live in bloody cloud cuckoo land. It's just going to, it always costs more to manufacture cheap products that people want in countries that are advanced nations where you have a minimum wage, where you have workers' rights. I know it's a shit system, but that's the system we've got. So yeah, with this, this focus on trade deficits rather than, actual tariff disparities or non-tariff barriers is just. It's just crazy. If they wanted to put tariffs on everything, it should have been 2.5%. It should have been very little. So the consumer wouldn't notice, but it would generate money for the American Treasury via the fact that, they're not paying, via the fact that everything coming into America has a small levy attached to it. Some people might not even notice because they pay a government sales tax in a lot of states in America anyway. He was talking about how VAT was so unfair, all these countries putting VAT on American products. And it's yeah, we put VAT on our products as well. We do that on our products. When we were in the EU, we forced every country who joined the EU to put VAT on everything. So they didn't have an advantage over us. But like I say, the EU still has itself to trade with, and China, and Japan, and South Korea, and Singapore, etc., etc. America has America is Brexited. This is Brexit on motherfucking steroids. It's on ketamine. It's Brexit on ket. That's what this is. It's just, so much. And then you've got the point about it takes a long time to build a factory. So we've got to make some trainers that used to be made in China, but we're going to make them in America instead. It's going to take 3 years to build that factory, get it up and running. It takes a year just to change production lines, to whatever new models coming out of a car. And he thinks that, that these tariffs will reduce the US trade deficit, but economists argue that tariffs are unlikely to eliminate trade deficits and may lead to retaliatory measures, which will increase it even more, which will harm US exports. So he's going, oh, well, if we buy less from other countries, right, then that'll bring down the deficit of the fact that people, we buy things more from other countries than we sell them. And the reason for that is obvious. There's a lot of poor countries in the world. I keep talking about this. 150 countries in the world. Relatively poor. Relatively poor. Surprisingly, unfortunately, relatively poor. There's about 50 countries that are doing all right. We're one of them. But there's 150 countries relatively poor. And while they can buy Coca-Cola, which is bottled locally in their country, they cannot afford to buy American products I don't know, a fucking Jeep or a Hummer or a Ford pickup truck. They can't afford to buy these fucking things. They're going to be rolling around in an old, what was it, the Toyota Hilux, is it? that you see going around Africa because they just last forever. But that's second hand, third hand, fourth hand. When I was traveling up from Nairobi towards the Ethiopian border, traveling north through the Badlands, the northern Badlands of Kenya, I was in an old Japanese school bus. It had little cartoon characters and Chinese, Japanese writing all over it. It couldn't go through the fucking desert. It broke down. It took us 2 days just to go about 200 bloody meters in the damn thing before we sacked it off and jumped on top of an 18-wheeler. Driving on top of a truck through the desert through the deserts of northern Kenya is one of the most exhilarating and terrifying experiences of my life. Not least because as we were moving off, as we were pulling off, the two little African girls, little Kenyan girls at the side of the road, and they wave at us. They wave at us, right? And it's me and Matt, the producer of my show. They wave to us, and we wave back, hiya, hiya, like this. And then as we're pulling away, one of them goes. I was like, pretend they didn't see that. Anyway, moving on. So this idea that they're going to be able to buy more stuff in these countries that are impoverished, that's for the birds. But then, if they put tariffs on imported goods, and then other countries, people start buying fewer imported goods in America, but then reciprocal tariffs are put on for the American goods that are being sold in these countries, right? So the price of Coca-Cola goes up, but the locally made soft drink, that stays the same. People are going to start buying the locally made soft drink. Of course they are. And do you know what? Coca-Cola sets up all the logistics. They don't own necessarily the local bottling plants. They could be converted to making some other drink that's not Coca-Cola. And they've got all the supply routes in place, all the logistics channels in place already. Thanks, Coke. But I'm not going to sell Coke because that's going to cost more. American cigarettes. They could cost more. They'll buy local cigarettes. Why would they buy American tobacco? Why would they? Why would they? Exactly. I mean, this whole thing is just off the charts bonkers. The idea that tariffs will bring back American manufacturing jobs. Well, some industries might benefit. Others relying on imported materials will face higher costs, higher production costs. You're not going to get wages down. They're already paying people the least they can pay them, which is capitalism, isn't it? The least they can get away with paying them. And you're going to have job losses. You're going to have job losses because they're going to have to. If they're going to want to compete, right? If you have an American factory and they want to compete with a factory in China, one of the first things they're going to have to do is sack off the people and replace them with robots to do the job. So it's not going to bring back American jobs. It's not going to bring back American manufacturing. It's just going to be an absolute clusterfuck, which is what we've been talking about. Thank you very much to Ivan Ambrose. Thank you, sir. Oh, I put my name up as well. Didn't mean to do that. Did anyone see Newsnight last night? Trump's Deputy Assistant Sebastian Gorka was on there. It's absolutely disgraceful to Victoria Derbyshire. I saw a link to it, Ivan, and I didn't click on it because I read the description and I was like, I don't want to watch these horrible people being horrible to people I like. Like, I like Victoria Derbyshire. She used to follow me on Twitter back when I used Twitter. And although she's part of the private school mafia, because of course she is, she's on telly. She's one of the few reporters that actually kick back and don't go, "Oh, what would you like to say, Minister? Oh, that's nice. Thank you very much for saying that, Minister." She seems to, have the difficult questions for everyone. But it's like playing chess with a pigeon, talking to these people. They're fucking idiots. And also Gareth T with £10 super chat. Thank you, Gareth T. It's very kind of you. How can a 6 times bankrupt know anything about business? It's like putting a pisshead in charge of a pub. He is wearing America like a rented tux. We are all facing the dry cleaning bill. Morning. Well, yes, we are. And this claim that America has been taken advantage of by other countries with unfair trade practices. Most countries have reduced tariffs to an open market in recent years. The US also has its own trade barriers. It's very narky when it comes to actually doing a trade deal with anyone. It's not wanted to do a trade deal with the UK. It's not wanted to do a trade deal with the EU because it doesn't want to do a trade deal with any country that it can't bully and say, right, these are the terms, you sign off to them or we're not having a trade deal. You can't do that to the EU. It's too big. It's too powerful. It doesn't have a trade deal with China for the same fucking reason. I mean, there are little deals in place on certain commodities and certain products. But here's the thing, right? So the way they've calculated what they think are tariffs, they've taken the entire trade deficit and they've divided it by the amount of imports coming into the US, right? So if there was, say, the trade deficit was, say, $80 billion and the amount coming in was 40 billion or something, they'll divide 80 by 40 and they'll get a figure of 2%, right? That's basically how they've done it. And it's just the maddest way to sort of work out the trade deficit, trade imbalance and stuff. Sorry, it'll be 50%. It'll be 50%. Sorry, what am I talking about? It'll be 50% because it's the percentage of one or the other. It's a percentage of the trade deficit to how much that country exports to the US. So yeah, that'll be in the case of it being 80-40, it'll be 50%. They'll say, oh, the tariffs are 50%, right? But here's the thing, right? Even if those tariffs were right, which they're not, but imagine in some magical fucked up world in which Indonesia is charging 76% tariffs on American imported goods, right? Which it isn't. If that was the case, which is not, Indonesia would have to charge that same 76% to every country that it doesn't have a bespoke trading agreement with on all products, right? It might be across the board. So it might be like meat, frozen meat carcasses have an 800% tariff and Coca-Cola has a 2% tariff or whatever. But in each commodity, right, that price that it charges the US under the most favored nation rule of the WTO, they have to set that same tariff for everyone. So Canada pays that tariff, Mexico pays that tariff, Panama pays that tariff, Colombia pays that tariff, Brazil pays that tariff, the EU pays that tariff, unless there is a bespoke deal between Indonesia and the EU. EU pays the same tariff as America. It's not like they single America out and go, but like the problem is that the people who vote Trump are so fucking stupid. You can't get this through to them. To me, this seems like blindingly obvious, but to them, it's like, I don't know, rocket science. So they can't get their head around it. So it scares them. They go, oh, economics. I don't know stuff about economics. And this is something that really pisses me off, right? I'll just thank you to Paul for the super chat there. Power to the Badger Pigeon Alliance. Hey, nice one. These people who vote for Trump and think that like, Trump is the be all and end all, and you can't argue with them. You just can't get through to them that this is a bad idea. They think because the Godhead Trump has said this is going to be amazing. They think it's going to be amazing, and when it's not, they're going to make excuses. He's going to blame the nasty people all over the world who put on nasty reciprocal tariffs. So these tariffs that he's invented, they'll actually become a real thing. They're not a real thing at the moment. It's just a trade deficit. He's worked out what the tariffs are based on a formula looking at the trade deficit, which is why he's got these mad numbers on the list. And then he's half that. So if it was 76%, he's half that and said, right, that's the tariff we're going to charge on all goods coming in from Indonesia. Or I'm giving Indonesia as an example. I don't have the figures in front of me. But like, what? So Indonesia's economy takes a hit. They make less stuff. They export less stuff to America. But also, it means that they will reposition to sell more stuff to other countries around the world. That's just the way it goes. And America's going to find itself in a very, very lonely place. A very lonely place indeed. But the way that they've gone about this is political theatre, political pantomime, political nonsense, set to make sure that Trump is on the front cover of every fucking newspaper everywhere in the fucking world. Because that's what he wants. He just wants the fame. He doesn't care about the American economy. He doesn't give a fuck about the American people. He doesn't give a fuck about anything but himself. He just wants the fame. He just wants to know that his face is on the front cover of his goddamn ugly, disgusting, orange fuck of a face is on the front cover of every fucking newspaper everywhere in the world. Sorry for swearing so much, Mum, but I'm a little bit vexed. I'm a little bit vexed with the. I think stupidity has just annoyed me more and more as I've got older. I've tried to mellow out about a few things. I understand that people have their deeply held beliefs and all that, and I try and be a bit cooler about it. But there is a raging inferno inside me, like the guy on his knees with his head on fire in that famous meme saying, "The stupid, it burns." That's how I feel when confronted with such density, such stupidity, like so fucking dense they bend light. And we have people like Liz Truss and Donald Trump and these knobheads around them making decisions, Elon Musk. And they're fucking idiots. They're absolute fucking idiots who were lucky enough, well, in the case of Trump and Musk, lucky enough to have a rich daddy. So they got that American Psycho thing going on where someone else always has to clean up their fucking murders, all their mistakes. It's just, yeah. So there's been, a global backlash. The European Union has condemned the tariffs and it's talking about potential countermeasures. China is going to take resolute countermeasures. Other nations like Japan and South Korea have expressed deep concern at the impact of global trade. In the government, Keir Starmer has emphasised the need to act in Britain's best interest and seek to mitigate the impact through negotiations. Maybe use their Trump card, which is the king. We'll get King Sausage Fingers and the King of England to, I don't know, make out or something. That's a gruesome twosome for you. But yeah, we've got potential challenges for UK exporters, particularly in industries like manufacturing and agriculture. Our whisky industry is going to be massively impacted by this due to increased costs and reduced competitiveness in the US market. There's a potential for a global trade war, which I think has already started, and then we've got the impact on the global markets and then, the market volatility that's got to come from this. As soon as the markets open in America, they're going to go all over the shop. They might go up, who knows, but they're probably going to go down. And then we've got inflation concerns, how increased tariffs will lead to higher consumer prices, contributing to inflationary pressures both in the US and around the world. Thank you very much to Alistair. Funds to help Graham. Oh, thank you, Alistair. Funds. I always get funds when I swear because everyone's like, oh God, this video is going to get demonetized. So anyway, he's going to make any money. So thank you very much, Alistair. That's very kind of you. Alistair, who's always very generous on this channel and has given lots of people memberships, which is really cool. He's going down the street throwing out memberships. You get a membership. You get a membership. You get a membership. It's very kind like that. Thank you, Alistair. Ivan, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Inventory costs rise, firms' debt rises, sales fall, costs stay high, markets shrink, loans cost more, prices jump, repeat. Well, exactly. And then John C. straight in there with another super chat. Thank you for the £10 super chat. Hungary has withdrawn from the ICC. Time for the EU to grow a spine with the Chancellor Orban. Yes, absolutely, John C. And there was a speech the other day in the EU where someone stood up and I've forgotten the name. There was a woman, she stood up and she said, we've got to, I think it was Article 7. They said they were going to activate, not Article 49. Is it Article 49 where they chuck people out? Article 7, and it takes away voting and veto rights away from Hungary because it's no longer a democracy. And I think what's happening with America is just going to push the EU into that because Hungary is aligned with America, it's aligned with Russia, it's aligned with our enemies. It's unfortunate to have to say that America is our enemy, but here we are. Let's have a little breakdown of some of the things that Trump said last night and why they're bollocks. So he said, we took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China because of my tariffs. No, they didn't. Tariffs are paid by importers, not foreign governments. The US Treasury collects its money from American companies, not from China. A study by the Federal Reserve, Princeton and Columbia universities found that nearly the entire burden of Trump's 2018-19 tariffs on China were passed on to American consumers and businesses. Tariffs are a tax on imports paid for by the importing party, usually American firms. The Chinese government, the Chinese people, the country of China did not pay anything. Anything. And they won't pay anything this time either. But these tariffs, they're paid for by American companies. He said, other presidents never got a penny from China. I was the first. Bullshit. The US had tariffs on Chinese goods since 1789. Barack Obama imposed tariffs on Chinese tires, steel, and solar panels. The US has always collected import duties on goods from China and other countries since its foundation. Trump wasn't the first, and the US collected billions in tariffs from China before he took office. Well, I say tariffs from China, I mean tariffs on Chinese goods coming in, because obviously the tariffs aren't paid by China. The US was proportionately wealthiest it's ever been from 1789 to 1913, when tariffs were our main source of revenue. He said this is a cherry-picked historical reference that ignores massive improvements in living standards, GDP, and technological developments in modern times. In 1913, people didn't have indoor plumbing or electricity or the internet or ChatGPT or Pornhub. I mean, per capita GDP today is dozens of times higher than it was in 1913. Modern economies also benefit from indoor plumbing, electricity, healthcare, and education, none of which widely existed in 1913. The US is far wealthier than it was in 1913 by every single meaningful metric, except if you're only counting tariffs as a share of federal revenue. In 1913, he said, they invented the income tax and made Americans pay instead of foreign countries. This is not true. Again, foreign countries don't pay tariffs. American companies importing, the importer pays the tariff. The income tax was introduced by the 16th Amendment in 1913, but it was not to replace tariffs per se. It was designed to diversify government revenue. It was a response to the inefficiencies and regressiveness of relying solely on import taxes, which disproportionately impacted poor people. Because you raise the cost of everything. You raise the cost of everyday items. The income tax was part of modernizing the US economy and addressing inequality, not some conspiracy to favor other countries. So they had this income revenue to the US, which was tariffs and stuff coming in. And then in 1913, they said, let's open up another channel. Let's turn another tap on. We'll call it income tax. But Trump and his Trumpy mates, libertarian mates, don't want to pay income tax. So they want China to pay. He called it the External Revenue Service, didn't he? He doesn't know what a tariff is. I mean, this is the very fucking basics. A tariff is a tax paid for by American companies on imports from other countries. That's it. That's what a tariff is. He talked about his trade deficit. Canada. Canada has he said they have a 275 to 300% tariff on milk after the first carton. He said the first carton is free, but after that, it's a 300% tariff, right? Canada has high tariffs on import quotas, high tariffs above import quotas. But here's the thing, right? The import quota on American milk going into Canada is massive. That's a free trade quota negotiated by Trump, by Trump's team for the USMCA deal that his team negotiated, and they can sell hundreds of thousands of litres of milk to Canada tariff-free, absolute free trade, until they hit a quota, and then that massive tariff comes in. But here's the thing. No one has ever had to pay tariffs that high on American dairy going into the US and into Canada, because no one's ever reached the tariff. They've never reached the tariff. They've never reached that level that they have to get to before those tariffs kick in. Never. They've never even come close. So all of the milk, every single drop of milk that has been sold from the US to Canada since that deal was signed 6 or 7 years ago has been tariff-free. And he's standing there going, oh, they charge 300% on our milk. No, they fucking don't. There are tariff-free quotas, and the US isn't even hitting them. The 300% milk tax is a deliberate distortion of how quota system works, and he knows it. He knows it, and he knows that his idiot people who follow him will believe it because they believe these lies. I mean, I'm just going through them. There's so many lies. Our trade deficit with Canada is 200 billion. 200 billion? No. The actual trade deficit is 35.7 billion, which is understandable because America has a population of 330 million. Canada has a population of 40 million. So do you think that there's going to be more opportunity for Canada's companies to sell stuff to the 330 million American consumers? Or will there be more opportunities to sell to 40 million consumers? Right, imagine you got a theme park, right? And one of them has 330 people in it, and the other one's got 40 people in it. Which theme park is going to make more money? Which theme park is going to have people buying more stuff from that theme park? The one with 330 people in it, because it's got more people than the other theme park. Simple as that. They've got fuckloads more people in America, so of course there's going to be a trade deficit. There's more people in America. If you went state by state, it wouldn't be that bad. But even that, it's goods and services, 35.7 billion. That's the trade deficit. If you take services out of it, it goes up to 70.6 billion, which is miles away from the 200 billion claimed by Trump. He's grossly exaggerated that figure, likely including re-exports or miscounting trade volume as a trade deficit. And the real number is not even half. It's not even half. I mean, the real number, goods and services, is 35 billion, which, considering the population of Canada is so small, what do you expect? They're never going to buy as much stuff. 40 people are not going to buy as much stuff as 330 people, okay? Stick $1 million on the end of that and just think about, actually, that doesn't sound so bad, to be honest with you. So let me get this straight. The population of America is, 8 times more than the population of Canada, and yet the trade deficit's only 35 billion? That's pretty good. We're doing well there, lads. We're selling them a lot of shit, clearly. I mean, we're buying a lot of shit off them, but we've got a deal. We have deals in place. And then he lied about the price of petrol. He lied about the price of gasoline. Gasoline is way under $3 a gallon. I brought it down, he said. Well, as of April the 2nd, the national average for a gallon of fuel in America, a gallon of gasoline, was $3.24, according to the AAA. Prices have risen slightly since Trump took office, and presidents don't control gas prices directly anyway. And, gas prices vary. I mean, the same in the UK. Our petrol prices vary. You go and get some petrol on the motorway, it costs twice as much as it does, if you actually get off the motorway and go down the road a little bit to the Sainsbury's. But gas prices vary by region, and while some places may be under $3, the national average is higher. Trump hasn't significantly changed gas prices since January, and he's saying that he brought it down when he fucking didn't. He talked about the fact that there was virtually no inflation during his first presidency. No, prices rose by 8%. 8% between January 2017 and January 2021. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. 8%. While inflation was lower than under Biden in 2022, it's still persistent and consistent with post 2008 levels. Trump had normal levels of inflation, not zero. Saying there was virtually no inflation is a gross oversimplification. He talked about Biden giving them the highest inflation in American history, a demonstrable lie. Honestly, he rambled on for an hour and he just trotted out lie after lie after lie. It was painful to watch. I had my little lie button. I've got a button that says lie and it comes up on the screen really big. Lie. Just have a little fucking klaxon going off. He said peak inflation under Biden was 9.1% in June 2022. The highest, not of all time, but in 40 years. Why did that happen? Inflation happened all over the world as a result of COVID. So this was the post-COVID recovery period. And the historic US inflation record is 23.7%. So that's more than 2.5 times more than what the moron was saying Biden got the highest. No. It was more than 2.5 times that in the past. Inflation under Biden was high, but it's not even close to the historical record, and it's since dropped to around 3%. Under Biden. Biden left the economy of America in pretty rude health. And then he's talking about tariffs being passed on to foreign countries. And as I've noted earlier, tariffs are paid by the importer, typically US companies. They often pass on those cost increases to customers via higher prices. the US public pays the tariffs, either directly or indirectly. Trump ignores this basic economic fact. I'm so annoyed that they're giving them a Nobel Prize for economics, because it makes it sound like economics is some mad science that it's just too difficult for, us plebs to get our heads around. And it's bollock. It's not. I mean, the people who make loads of money on the market are just good at gambling. They're just good at like checking the form of the horses and going, okay, I'll put my money on this horse because they're most likely to win the race. It's just gambling. But with those people, it's gambling with other people's money, so they don't give a fuck. And then you got this ridiculous tariff calculation formula. There's a White House official who said, this is not a negotiation, it's a national emergency, because of the way that they've calculated this formula. So, for example, with China, the surplus of Chinese goods coming into America to American goods going into China is $295 billion. Okay, that's the surplus. And that's out of 438 billion exports, which gives us a total of 67.3%. And what they've done is they've taken that 67.3% and they've halved it, divided it by 2 to give 33.7%, rounded that up to 34%, and that's the tariff that they slapped on China, on top of the tariffs that they've already done to China. So China's tariffs have just gone through the roof. And it's just, this has no connection. This formula has no connection to tariffs, taxes, or trade barriers at all. At all. Like, it doesn't have no connection at all. It punishes countries for exporting more than they import, even if they have no unfair trade practices. And they're just a smaller country. So obviously, like, okay, look, if everyone in America spends $1 on British stuff, right? Great. We get $330 in our pot, right? If everyone in the UK spends $1 on American stuff, they're only going to get $68. That's all they're going to get, right? Every person, 68 million. So yeah, they'll get 68 million, right? But if we all spend $1, they all spend $1 on stuff from us, it'll be 330 million they'll get, right? That's one hell of a trade deficit. So to get to the point where that there's an equilibrium there, the British people would have to spend 5 times the amount on American goods. So we'll all individually have to spend $5 each on American products, whereas they're only spending $1 each on British products for the same absolute value of around $330 million. He doesn't seem to take this into account. Population differences. But also, you've got China, you've got India, which have massive populations, 1.4 billion people in each country. Yeah, fair enough. But most of the people in those countries do not have the money to be buying American products because they're still developing nations. China's very powerful. It's very rich, I know, but it's still technically a developing nation. Basically, this idea of punishing countries for being smaller than America, that's what he's doing. He's going, oh, you're smaller than us. You should spend 5 times more per person on imports from America than we spend on imports from you. There's a pseudo-mathematical logic that's been applied to complex geopolitical and economic systems. And it is like putting... What's the name? Powerade or something? Was it Gatorade in Idiocracy, where they were putting like Mountain Dew or something on the crops because Mountain Dew gives energy or something, and they thought that's how you grow crops. And the guy from 500 years in the past turns up and he says, no, you want to just use water. That's the way to do it. Just use water. Don't be using Gatorade. This is the equivalent. It's like, oh, I've fed the crops poison. It's all dead simple now. Never trust people who want to make out that anything in life is dead straightforward and simple and there's one size fits all. You're going to get sick of me saying this, but everyone's different. Every country's different. Everyone's got a different history. Everyone's got a different psychology. Everyone's got a different chemical makeup of their brain. Everyone's different. What works for one person might not work for another. This is why I wish people would shut the fuck up when someone's got a cold and they're like, oh, here's my remedy that works for me. And they're like, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I'm like, I'll do what works for me. I'm 46. I've had colds before. I know what I like to do when I have a cold that alleviates the symptoms of the cold for me. And I know what works for me. And I know that you're trying to be helpful. And I know that it's a human instinct to go, oh my God, there's someone in distress. I want to help them. I completely get that. And if you want to say, this is what works for me, that's a nice way of putting it. Do it like that. If you have a mental health problem, if you have an addiction, if you have fallen in love with the wrong person, whatever your problem is in life, and there's something that works for you, fucking great. Doesn't mean it'll work for me. One of the big problems that people who work with drug addicts have is that when a former drug addict wants to talk to people who have, who are trying to get out of the cycle of addiction, they have their method that works for them, whether it's heroin or whether it's cigarettes. They had a thing that broke their addiction. And yeah, it worked for them. It doesn't mean it's going to work for all your people in the group. It might work for some of them, right? But there's more than one way to skin a cat in everything in the world. And when people say, no, here is the one magic solution that's going to fix everything in your life, they're a fucking con man. You've got to understand they always are a con man. If someone turns up with some magical fucking orange juice that's going to cure your cancer, they are conning you. If it was that easy, of course people would just drink lots of orange juice and that would get rid of their cancer. But just because it worked for you, or like it works for someone who you read about on Reddit, fucking hell, doesn't mean it's going to work for other people. And especially when it's something as serious as cancer, it's really fucking insulting to say to people who have got cancer, oh, here's a method, here's an alternative method to things that we know work, like chemotherapy and radiotherapy, which are brutal, which are absolutely brutal ways of treating this horrific disease. But it's the best method we've got at the moment. We know that it works in certain cases, and yes, it doesn't work in all cases. Even vaccines aren't an absolute cure-all because some people are negatively affected by vaccines. But the damage that is done to the 1% of the population who have an allergic reaction to the needle or whatever it is tiny compared with the number of people who will literally die of polio or smallpox or measles if it's left to just run riot through populations. It's like 1 in a million. Like you've got to work out the harms that can be done, and there's no effects without side effects. If you take people are so against particular drugs. Like when you go to foreign countries and you take your prophylactics for malaria, say, and people will say, "Oh, don't take Lariam, don't take Lariam." It's like, why? Oh, it gave me nightmares. I'm like, okay, it gave you nightmares, and who knows, it might give me nightmares. But if it doesn't and it's effective, it means I only have to take a pill once a week instead of every single day like I do with doxycycline. So I'd rather take the thing and see if it works for me. If it doesn't, I'll try something else. Taking the pill. Like for some women, the pill fucks them up. It's really, really bad for them, right? Because their physiology, their brain makeup, whatever it is, their hormones, it doesn't work. It makes a bad situation worse. But for someone who's not taking the pill because it had that effect on them, to say to other women, you shouldn't take the pill. Why not? Oh, because it fucks you up. It might not fuck them up. It might not. For the vast majority of women on the pill, it doesn't fuck them up. But because there are some people out there who are very vocal about the fact it fucked them up, they're like, no one can take that thing because it made me do this. It had this result on me. And we've got to stop thinking this way. We have to stop thinking one size fits all for any fucking problem in the world, whether it's the economy, whether it's health, whether it's education. We've got the time and we've got the energy and we have the wisdom to come up with bespoke solutions to all of these problems. The problem with the EU, as far as a Brexiteer was concerned, was this and that. They were telling us what to do. They weren't. It was built on lies and lies and lies, and our relationship with the EU was built up over decades. Some would argue over centuries, perhaps even over millennia. Our relationship with the rest of our continent. trading relationship. We've always traded around our continent. We've never just been, sitting there in Surrey going, no, we're never leaving. We've always been a group of people who moved around and sold stuff. The name of the country in which I live is England, which means Angleland. It literally means land of the immigrants, land of people from some other place. That's what it literally means, which is just... But there was a solution. There was an easy solution to this tanglement that we had with the EU, with their political institutions and economic institutions. There was a solution, and it was called Brexit. And it was dead simple. We just pull out the EU. Only it wasn't simple. It's not simple. It has affected the British economy. It's affected trade. It's affected British businesses in ways that will echo through the ages. At least till we go back into the EU, which I think is inevitable. But a simple solution to a complex problem will never, ever work. Yes, we have to put in the hard yakka. We've got to put in the work to suss out the optimum outcome. And thinking that of is, we just have an everything app, says Elon Musk. Cloud cuckoo land. Absolute cloud cuckoo land. Life isn't like that. Life is messy. Life is complex. And we have to deal with that. And that's fine. And just because complexity is a bit scary doesn't mean we should flee from it into the arms of fucking demons who are trying to destroy our way of life. Who are trying to destroy everything we see as good and fair and just. We've got to stop this mentality. It's puerile. It's infantile to think, we'll just do X and that'll work for everyone. We'll just bring in this curriculum in London and that'll work for everywhere in the whole British Isles. We'll all work from this one idea in London. One size fits all. What works for us will work everywhere else. It doesn't work like that. It's why democracy is messy. It's why no country in the world has a perfect system of democracy. There isn't one. There's different flavors of democracy. You can have a presidential democracy. You can have a parliamentary democracy. You can have a referendum-run, referendum-led democracy like what they have in Switzerland. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and some things work for some countries better than others. But thinking in America right now, with the executive in charge of America, there's already been a bill that's been brought up in the Senate, which has gone through actually, to stop the tariffs on Canada. It's already gone through, but it's going to go to the House of Representatives where it's going to die. Even if it's somehow by some miracle got through the House of Representatives where the dickheads have the majority, whose desk does it land on? Whose desk does this bill from the Parliament of America saying we should stop putting these tariffs on Canada, our closest trading partner, we should stop doing that, right? Whose desk does it land on? Donald Trump's. And he just goes, I'm not signing that. And it doesn't become law. Because that's the American system. They have vetoes and they also have pocket vetoes. Where he can absolutely use his veto power to say, I'm not signing this. That can be overruled by, 2/3 of the Senate? Great system. Never going to happen. Or he can do a pocket veto, which literally means he puts it in a drawer until the end of that legislative session of their parliament, of their Congress. And nothing happens with it. He just sits on it like an email that's left unanswered by Donald Trump. What a stupid fucking system. Really, honestly. Let's. The one thing that I can see as a big positive to come out of all this fucking nonsense, once all the dust is settled and we're living in huts, is that at least it might change the American system. It might force the change of the American system that otherwise wouldn't have happened when enough Americans wake the fuck up and realize they've been played like a cheap fiddle and the price of eggs have not come down, and that there is no magic formula. There is no panacea. There is no surefire way of curing the world of all of its economic problems. You've got to get down into the dirt. It's messy. It's difficult. And using ChatGPT to come up with economic formulas to say, oh, we need to put these tariffs on these countries. They're putting these tariffs on us when they're absolutely not. 9 times out of 10 with those tariffs, it was just they're dealing with a smaller country. Yes, Switzerland is going to buy less American stuff than Americans are going to buy from Switzerland. Switzerland sells fucking expensive watches and diamonds, for Christ's sake. And America's got a much bigger population. They're going to be huge. They're going to be huge. Anne Phillips says, never mind, 50 years' time, we'll all be better off, apparently. Yeah, that's the word on the street, isn't it? The turd on the street. Can anyone in the government read? Nope. I can imagine it, human rights, clean water, and treated with respect. That would be nice. I'd like to see that, Ms. Spock. We've got Chris C here. Thank you very much for the £2 super chat. And the markets are punishing him this morning. Yeah, the markets are going to just jump off a bloody cliff. It's absolute fucking bonkers. I hope I've convinced you. If there's anything that I've said that you think I said wrong or you didn't understand when I was talking about that because I was talking bollocks maybe, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat. We've got a few more minutes of the show before I go. But we're going to have a look at the papers. But yeah, if you wanted to have a little bit more of a discussion on like why this is such transparent nonsense, if I haven't explained it very well, I do apologize. But like the idea that you can just do this blanket, it's like a kid who hasn't done their fucking homework, who quickly goes on ChatGPT on the bus, on the way to school, and types in, will you do my homework for me? And ChatGPT just pumps out some stuff. And that's what the US government are using for economic policy that could, and probably will, destroy the world's economic system. We're going into a trade war. We're going into a trade war. Ivan Ambrose, thank you very much for the £10 super chat. It's very kind of you. It's the same with mental health treatment with regards to autistic people. CBT doesn't work for the majority, and the few that it does work, it has to be often more than not adapted. Yeah, Ivan, you're absolutely right. I had a partner who suffered from borderline personality disorder. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, worked really well for her. And I've got other friends who have suffered from other mental health problems, depression, anxiety, where they've been on medication for it and it's helped. I've had other friends who have been on medication for it, the same medication, and it's not helped. Everyone's different. I say, when you're going through that whole titration process, find out what works for you. And just because that thing didn't work for you doesn't mean it's not going to work for someone else. And if that thing did work for you, and the worst people for this, I'm sorry to say it, and I don't want to upset anyone in the chat, are fucking potheads. Seriously. They believe that pot cures everything because it worked for them. Get over yourself. Just because it worked for you and your brain chemistry doesn't mean it works for everyone. And yes, I agree, pot should be legalized. I think all drugs should be legalized and regulated by the NHS. However, we don't live in that world at the moment. When you smoke weed, unless you grow it yourself, you're giving money to criminals. One way or another, you're supporting those county line gangs who like to go around stabbing children. You're funding, if you're into cocaine, you are funding a trail of blood that goes all the way through Europe, down to Guinea, across the Atlantic Ocean, to Colombia, to Bolivia, to a family of peasant farmers, campesinos living in the rural areas. One day, a drug lord turns up at their property and murders their children in front of them and says, right, you're growing you're growing coca now on in your fields. You're not growing wheat anymore. You're not growing corn. You're going to grow our drugs. And if not, I'm going to come back and kill the rest of your kids. So I'm sure there are people out there who think cocaine works for them. And I'm sure probably in some cases it actually might do. I don't know if they want to be more annoying, but think about the consequences of your actions. And yes, I know that Coca-Cola do horrible things, but compare with the global drugs trade. God, Coca-Cola looks like a fucking saint, which is saying something. Anyway, so we're going to just go over to the papers now that I've had my little rant. One size does not fit all. Let me just say. Let's go here. Daily Express. Shares tribute to great friend Val Kilmer as he dies at 65. Oh, I'm a bit upset about that. Good old Val. Dirty Val. Just gone to the the great soundstage in the sky. Bit weird in the movie Maverick, Top Gun Maverick. He dies of throat cancer in that, and they have a funeral, and they reckon that a couple of the people at the funeral are actually his kids as extras at his funeral. Art imitating life or something. I don't know. We've got Brexit. Britain escapes worst of Trump tariffs pain. Well. I mean, the UK imports to the US will face 10% levy compared to the EU's 20%. Yeah, but we're a lot smaller. And we don't sell as much stuff to America as the EU does. I mean, you know, just in terms of volume alone, the EU is going to continue to sell more stuff to the US than we are. This is going to put another block on us, and they're trying to, the Daily Express, because of all Brexity bastards, they're trying to sell this as a win. It's absolutely not a win. It's not a win by any stretch of any kind of fevered imagination. It is a total loss for everyone across the board. But the thing is, the EU can still trade amongst itself, and it's got a massive internal market. A free market of over 450 million people. The UK has walked away from the EU. We've put up non-tariff barriers with our trade with the EU. And this impacted our economy by 4%. Billions and billions of pounds a year that aren't going to, trade, not going to investment, not going to the exchequer. And now, our second biggest trading partner after the EU, the US, has put a 10% tariff on us. And we don't have the EU trade to fall back on like the other countries of the EU. So no, Express, it's not a fucking win. It's not a win. It's not a win for Brexit Britain by any stretch of the imagination. Helen Pixels, have a cup of coffee on me, Graham. Thank you very much, Helen. That's very kind of you. Cool. US Medsy, sorry I've not been about, Graham. Had bad mental health period recently and just recovering. Mate, honestly, it's fine. Don't feel obliged that you have to watch me talk bollocks on these shows. Your health comes first, and that goes for everyone watching this. Your health comes first. Do what works for you, and just don't disparage stuff that might work for other people, and never ever belittle people for what works for them. I'm not saying that weed doesn't work for people. I totally understand and get that it totally fucking does. Right? I get that. What I'm sort of having a pop about is it's not a panacea for everyone. It doesn't work for it. There's no such thing as a panacea because everyone's different. Everyone reacts differently to stuff. Using the same Brexit won't be as bad as promised arguments to justify it just being bad, says Veckle Puny. Yeah, indeed. Trump triggers $1 trillion global trade war in threat to UK jobs and wages. UK hit with 10% import tasks and EU with 20%, as Trump imposes what you call reciprocal tariffs around the world. They're not reciprocal. And they've got this brilliant little bit here, just right next to me, about Val Kilmer. It says, brilliant but a nightmare. Oh, what an epitaph. Brilliant but a nightmare. I want that. Can I have that? Can I borrow that when I go? When I cark it? Put it on my gravestone. Along with I Told You I Was Ill. We've got the Times here with Caitlin Moran doing the Caitlin Moran face. She does that in every picture. I met Caitlin Moran. She actually got her break in journalism because she's not private school mafia. She got her break in journalism by entering a competition. Just for any budding writers out there, competitions a good way to go. Trump piles on the tariffs. British imports hit with baseline 10% levy. EU faces 20%. New charges start to apply from Saturday. And there's the orange gobshite himself signing an executive order in his big Sharpie pen because he's a bit special. He uses a Sharpie pen. Trump's tariff war on foreign scavengers. He called us scavengers. Go fuck yourself, you fat fucking idiot. Where are we here? Trading blows. Yeah, horrible little plumper lump. But look at the line on his face. I mean, I don't want you to look at his face. Look at the line of bronzer on his face here. You can see his normal skin color, and then he looks like he's Mrs. Doubtfire when Robin Williams isn't in costume and he puts the cake in his face, and then he put trading blows. Nations poised to retaliate as Trump reveals extensive tariff. Britain hit with lowest level of 10%, while EU hammered at 20%. Hammered? I think Indonesia got hammered the worst. Was it Indonesia got some ridiculous... Here we go. We'll see the board here. So China, he reckons that the tariffs charged. It says tariffs charged to the USA. That's what it says there, and it's not. It's bullshit. 67%. That's nowhere near that. The European Union charged nearly 40% on tariffs to me. Vietnam, 90%. Because Vietnam's a poor country. I can buy fucking expensive products from America. India, 52%. I mean, they just pulled these numbers out of us. And then it's the worst one. It's like United Kingdom, tariffs charged to the USA, 10%. USA discounted reciprocal tariffs, 10%. How is that a fucking discount, knobhead? How is that a discount? It says a discount at the top here. It says discounted reciprocal tariffs. And there's no discount at all. And then, Switzerland with its tiny population, 61%. He just pulled these numbers out of his fucking chat GPT arse. It's just so frustrating. Trump hits UK with 10% tariffs. There you go. And then the Star, telling us what the important stuff. What's the moon ever done for us? On page 6. And giant vermin terror, rats as big as dogs, and a guy holding up a big rat very close to the camera. I don't think it's that big, to be honest with you, but whatever. And then we've got the Financial Times here with TikTok. Apparently it's going to get disconnected this weekend. April the 5th, it's going to get disconnected. It's going to be turned off in the US. It's going to go dark. But it looks like one of Trump's mates might be buying the platform. Hooray! Moving on. UK plan for joint European fund to help finance continent's rearmament. Push for weapons stockpiles. Coalition of the willing to benefit. State guarantees with lower prices, which is good. Trump signals sale of his $2.3 billion stake in Truth Social after Newsmax surge. So he's going to sell all of his shares, take out billions. He's going to become a multi-billionaire out of this. And all the knobheads, all the Trump fans who put their life savings into Truth Social are going to lose everything. But there you go. Heathrow had 2 fire warnings. It's quite interesting that these 2 papers, the Financial Times and the Metro, are just not even mentioning Trump's tariffs. Like, fuck it. Who cares? Which is cool. I wonder if Trump is going to use the tariffs as bargaining chips against poorer countries to gain access to their natural resources. Probably, yeah. Lesotho, 50% tariff on a GDP of 2.1 billion. I know, Mike. This tiny little kingdom in the mountains of southern Africa. Oh, they're ripping us off. The people from Lesotho, they're taking our jobs. No, they're fucking not, you tit. Ishtar, you have to almost wonder if it's on purpose. Surely Trump can afford a good makeup artist. He's the president of the US, or does he insist on doing it himself or something? I think he does it himself. Good Lord, look at the uneven orange goo on Trump's face. Yeah, he's so proud he can write his own name. Says Danny, very, very good point. I can write my own name. Ishtar says, depression medication didn't work for me for the longest time. Tried lots of different ones, but then I found one that's helped and it's great. Yeah, titration. I'm serious about this. Find out what works for you. And if someone tells you that there's something that worked for them, try it. Try it. It might work for you, but it might not work for you. And if that person says to you, I tried it, but it didn't work for me, don't get angry with them. Don't get pissy with them, because different things work for different people. I can't stress that enough. Life is complex, but that doesn't mean it has to be difficult. It doesn't mean it has to be horrible. I mean, it has to be nasty and brutish and short. But this is what all these libertarian knobheads want. They think that if they got rid of income tax, then the world would be an amazing place instantly. They'll have all this extra money to spend on stuff. We're talking about the richest people in the fucking world here. We're talking about 3 people in America, Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, who all have, between them, they have more money than 50% of the American population. Over 170 million people put together have less money than 3 people. And they're like, oh, if only we didn't have to pay income tax, we'd have more money to spend on stuff. We'd have more money to invest in things. Ivan Ambrose, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. What are disability benefit payments like in France, Germany, and the US? I know the US could be state dependent. I would just like in comparison to the UK. I don't know off the top of my head, Ivan. I'd have to do some research into that. All I can tell you is that the poverty that I saw in America, that I've seen in America over the years, is absolutely horrific. The worst example I can think of was when I was there in 2013. I was in Hollywood, I was in LA, and I got off the train, and they've got a little underground thing going on there, a little subway thing. And I got off the train near the studios, near where they film studio stuff. I'm walking out the train station, and they have like a big ramp as you're going out into the outside. And there was a guy at the side of the path, and he had a sign that said "Help, burnt in fire, burnt in fire, please help." This poor guy had 95% burns all over his body. You could see his hands and his face. He had been badly burned, like really badly burned. And he was, instead of being looked after and helped, this disabled guy who, I don't know what had happened to him, but he was begging on the street of the richest state in the richest country in the world. And that, for me, I've seen stuff like that in India. I've seen it in Egypt. I've seen it in developing countries all over Africa, all over Asia. I've seen that kind of thing. America, the richest country in the world, can't look after the people who live in America. I think Trump is going to cut disability payments in the US, says Ms. Spock. I could see that happening. I know disability entitlements in the US are shocking, says Chris C. They absolutely are. Suzanne says it's federal to determine if you qualify. States administer food stamps and Medicaid, but national programs and Medicare and SSI need base and SSDI worked and earned credit. Nick and Dish says it's trade deficit divided by export and divided by 2. As Ian Dunt said, it's like counting apples and bagels in your kitchen and coming up with your mortgage rate. It is absolutely right. UK Medsy. The scary thing is, Graham, we have seen nothing yet. The real shit has not hit the fan yet. Americans are in for a real rough time. It's going to get violent. Yeah, but I can't see it getting violent for us. Like, I can't see people in Britain going out and smashing stuff up because of America. It wouldn't do any good. It wouldn't help in any way. So I'm a little bit more positive about the impacts that's going to have on us. Just a couple of days ago, David Lammy and Keir Starmer made it clear that nothing is off the table. When they say nothing is off the table, that means rejoining the EU is back on the table. Thank you very much. Cheers for that, guys. But the way that we deal with this will, it's going to set the agenda for decades to come. And we have a massive trading bloc that we trade with more than America anyway, on our doorstep, and we could be doing twice as much trade with the EU if we rejoined, or even just joined the single, a customs union, or joined a version of the single market. The EU light that's been proposed by Macron, and it's been pushed by a few other EU leaders. Like, we have an outer orbit of the EU where you have some of the trade deals and things like that, but you don't get a veto over the things that the EU core want to do, and that's something that they can throw Hungary out into. So Hungary can't keep on vetoing anti-Russian policies coming out of the European Parliament, and it also means that the countries like Turkey, the UK, Canada even can be part of this outer orbit of the EU and benefit from free air trade, as free as it can get, without actually being part of the political integration of the EU. And I know that's not going to be easy. Again, nothing in life is easy. It's going to be complex. It's going to take a bit of time, but I believe that is a worthwhile goal for the foreseeable to get to, and as a step back towards the EU. But we need to get people on side. Maybe this will be the thing. But when the tabloids are spinning it as a Brexit benefit, that we didn't get a 20% trade tariff, we only got a 10% trade tariff, even though the amount of trade that we do with the US is a lot smaller than the trade that we do with the EU. The economic impact of these tariffs is going to be a 0.5% of our GDP, whereas the impact of leaving the EU is many times that. It was 4%. 4% of our GDP. I'm in several complex minds, says Ivan. Well, yeah, it's what's going to happen next is it is pretty much conjecture, but I can't see any other route that the UK Parliament have other than going back into the loving, caring arms of the European Union and getting us far away from Trump and the USA and the demented way of punishing countries around the world for having smaller populations or being poorer than the United States of America. Why aren't you buying all of our stuff? Well, we're trying, but, we don't have as much money as you guys. Ah, you bastards. Here you go. Have a tariff. Anyway, if I've got Phil's video right, if we rejoin the EU and stopped all US exports, we'll be up by 40 billion. We'll be up by 40 billion if we rejoin the EU. If we stopped all US exports, that would actually impact that figure, so it would come down. I don't think that we should stop all exports. I don't think we will. But a lot of British companies are going to be really badly affected by this, not least the whiskey companies, the Scotch whiskey companies up in Scotland, the distilleries. But yeah, there you go. All right, so I'm going to head off now. I'll leave you in the capable hands of James O'Brien, who started his show about 14 minutes ago. You can join in, I'm sure. And if you would like to join me later today, I'm going to be doing another episode of Fuse the World. It's going to be 99% less upsetting and sad and terrifying as the episode I did on the Democratic Republic of Congo, because I'm traveling to Denmark. I'm going all Danish. I'm going to say Skål with my Tuborg beer and my Carlsberg, drinking my ice cold in Alex. In Denmark. So if you'd like to join me for that, we'll be talking about the history of the place, which is kind of fascinating. And it's in the news at the moment because of Greenland and the Faroe Islands. And it used to own Norway for some reason. And also, the Danish came over here. We're all part Danish over here in the UK. Well, not all of us, but like the vast majority. Got a bit of Dane law in us. So yeah, if you'd like to join us for that at 6 o'clock tonight, you are very welcome. I'm going to do some research now. Start reading through my European Lonely Planet. And Danny says, "You're welcome, Graham." You're welcome. You're welcome. Listen, before you go, before I forget, give us a like. Give us a like. Quickly. Just click on the like, and then I'll let you go and go with God. So listen, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the chat. Thanks for all the super chats. I'll be back at 6 o'clock tonight for Hughes of the World, Denmark. And until then, I'll say thanks for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and good